Welcome back. So in this lesson, we will learn about math functions, a new data type called char, string objects, as well as proper formatting of output. So let's get started. So the first thing you should do is do read chapter 4 of our text, which will give a better background on what will be covered here. So Java provides a math class, and a variety of methods come with that. Right? There are two that you have used already. One is math random, which you used for an earlier program, and also math round for rounding numbers, which we also have used. Other things it provides is math constants such as pi or e. Allows you to do trig operations such as sine, cosine, and converting degrees from radians and such. Exponent functions such as e raised to the power of x, logarithmic function, power function, square root functions. Rounding methods such as floor, ceil, round, and such. Min, max, and absolute value functions. So let's look at an example. So here I've written a small class called myExample, which has some print functions. And I've taken a function from each of those sections I provided earlier to show you what it looks like, right? So first we'll print pi, right, with this print line. Then we will take pi and convert into degrees. Next we will do 2 to the power of 3. Followed by rounding the decimal 4.5 to the nearest whole number. And then the min function, giving 2 decimal numbers, what is the min of those two? Okay, I've already compiled it, so let's just run it. So there you have it. Pi is 3.14 and so on. Pi becomes 180 in degrees. 2 raised to the power of 3 is 8. 4.5 rounded is 5. And the min of 4 and 3 is actually 3. Let's look at a generic way of getting a random number between a number a and a number a plus b. It would be this. If you look at your last program where you got a number between 1 and 100, you would notice this is the same pattern. So do study it a little bit, but it's just there for to complete your knowledge. Next, we will introduce a new data type. So far you know int, double, and Boolean. Now this new one is called char. Right? A char is a single letter, a letter like a capital A, or a letter like 4. This is not the number 4, but this is the character 4, right? Whereas a string uses double quote, a char uses single quotes, right? So A in double quotes is a string, whereas A in single quote is a character, right? String is made up of a series of characters. So the string hello world is made up of 11 characters, including the space character in the middle, right? Now, interestingly enough, characters are equivalent to numbers in Java, right? And this mapping of characters to numbers is called the ASCII mapping or the ASCII encoding, right? So the lowercase letter a, for example, is mapped to the number 97, right? The capital Z is mapped to the number 90 and so on, right? So interesting enough, with this, you're allowed to do mathematic operations such as increments on characters. So if you took the character A and did an increment on it, you'll end up with a character B, such. Now there are obviously certain special characters such as a backspace character that's represented by \b in single quotes, tab character, line feed character. If you actually wanted to represent the character \, you would use \\. So for example, if you actually wanted to print double quotes, you would have to put a backslash in front of it, or what's called escaping it. So you can actually print it because it is also used to represent the string. So let's try this out in an example. So I have commented out my old code and put in some new code. And here I'm declaring a new variable called mychar, which is of type char, right? And it's been initialized to the lowercase a. I have another variable called numchar, which is initialized to the character 4, not the number 4. Then I'm printing it in various ways. So I'm printing the char itself. I am printing its ASCII mapping by casting it to int. I'm also printing the numchar character. And then the last one is an example of how to print a double quote, the one from the notes. So I've already compiled it. Let's run it and see what happens. So you notice that the character A gets printed and then it's ASCII mapping. I told you earlier that the letter lowercase a maps to the ASCII value 97. Then the numchar character is printed, and then finally I printed he said Java is fun, and this is an example showing how you can print double quotes from within strings. Now we also have additional methods available to us to check whether the character is a digit, letter or a digit, whether it's lower or uppercase, and to convert the character to an upper or lowercase version of itself. The next data type is string. Now, unlike int, double, bool, and char, this is not a primitive data type, but it's an object or class like scanner or system. We've already said that a string is made up of a number of characters, and it is declared this way. You use the word string. Notice, since it's a class, it's capitalized. This is the identifier or the name of the variable, and then you initialize it by having text within double quotes followed by a semicolon, right? String objects have certain methods available to them. One is length, which gives you the number of characters in the string, right? Another method, char at, will give you the character at that position. But note that in computer science, positions start with 0. So the first position, the capital H here, is at position 0, 1, 2, and so on, right? We can concatenate two strings, so join them, or to convert strings completely to caps or completely to lowercase, or remove trailing or leading white spaces, right? In this example, it's basically showing how to go ahead and concatenate. So you declare a variable called message, which is initialized to hello world. You declare another variable called new message, and this gets initialized to hello world, which is in message. Concatenate it with toJane. So the new message will contain hello world toJane, right? The length of the original string is 11, 5 and 5 plus the middle space, and char at 6 is a capital W because it is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and at the 6th position. All right, you can also use the plus operator to combine two strings. So you can do hello world plus toJane and you will get the same effect. Reading strings is much like reading integers and doubles, but instead now you are using the method next instead of nextInt or nextDouble. And the method next will get you the next word that's entered, whereas next line will get you the complete line till it sees a new line character or carriage return. Strings can be compared with various methods available to us. Equals and equals by ignoring case, starts with, ends with, and contained. So let's try an example. So here I have declared a string called A string that's initialized to good day. B string is initialized to you. Then I have C string here that is made up of concatenating those two strings with an empty string literal in the middle, right? Because you need a space in the middle. Then I convert the whole string to uppercase and print that whole string to lowercase. I print it. The length of the string. Character at position 5, which should be the capital D. And then check whether this string that I created starts with the substring good. Right? So I've already compiled it. Let's run it and see what happens. So there you have the original string, the capitalized string, the lowercase string, the length of the string, character at position 5, and whether it starts with a capital good, it's equals to true. Okay. There are other methods that you can explore, which is getting a substring in various ways and getting an index of an occurrence of a character and such that you can play with. There are also ways to convert strings into integers and decimal that are provided here. We won't really be using this for the class, but it's here for completion. Do watch this video that talks about reading input and testing it for validity, right? I won't cover it here, but do encourage you to go through that in detail and use it in your program. Lastly, we will talk about precise control over formatting output, right? So far we've used the method print and println, which gave you a new line character. Now we'll introduce a new one called printf, right? And it looks very similar, except instead of taking just strings, it takes the first parameter, which is a format string, right? And certain items that are used to populate the format string. So let's take an example here, and then we'll cover what the different format specifiers are, right? So I have created a string here, name, which is initialized to Jane, and then I have an integer here, temp, which is initialized to 65, right? So I'm using printf here, and the first part here is called the format. And the format is basically a string that will be printed, but then there are certain specifiers, these %s and the %d parts of it, that are placeholder and that are filled in by the extra variables that you give. So the first one will be filled in by the first item. The next one will be filled in by the next item. Whether it's a %s or %d specifies how you're supposed to format it. The %d means that it is an integer, so you should show it as an integer. The %s means that it's a string, so you should show it as a string. The other ones are %f for decimals, %c for characters, and %b for booleans, right? You can also use format to very precisely control the column width. So for example, if you use this specifier, it means that you want the whole thing should be a width of 5 characters, where the first 4 are spaces, and the last one is used to print the actual character item that you provide. Similarly here, this is used for booleans, and the width of the whole thing will be maintained at 5, and it'll be filled in by a true or false, right? And there are other ones provided here that you can look at in detail, and you will actually be using these in the next program, so you'll get quite a bit of experience with this. Lastly, we'll talk about input redirection. Just like you can enter things at the prompt, you can tell your Java program to take the same input from a file. And the way you do that is you run your Java program as before. You don't have to change the content of the program at all, except that you do this less than a character followed by the file name. And when you run the program, instead of taking the input from the terminal, it's taking the input from the data from the file input.txt. All right, thank you, and I'll see you next time.